do some kind of example analyses with different possibilities we might be in here. One possibility is developing a new instrument. Okay. The second will be using an existing instrument. The third possibility is you might be shortening an existing instrument. You may be doing some combination of that, use an existing one that you shorten, develop a new one, then shorten. I mean, you may be some combinations. We just kind of want to talk through it a little bit, okay? The first thing let's suppose that we're going to develop a new instrument here, and we want an instrument that's going to measure. We're going to let's come up with something here that we might want to measure. Okay. Feeling brain overloaded. Okay?
Appropriate.
Okay, you got it? Nobody can relate to this kind of thing. Okay, so that's the thing we want to measure, okay? And we're going to try and figure it out. Now, it might be that I could just tell you on a scale of 1 to 10 how overloaded is your brain right now, you know? And maybe you'd all say, no, I'm about 9.8 or whatever, right? But that might be inaccurate because I might talk for 3 more hours. You could be even more overloaded then, right? You could be more brain overloaded now than you are now. Like if we went till 5 o'clock, okay? Then you might be more overloaded now. So it's hard to know where to put yourself maybe on that scale. So we're going to try to pin it to some items that help us measure it more precisely, okay? So let's say, first thing we got to do is we've got to define what this construct means. What do we mean by it? Anybody want to take a stab at a definition of this?
Level of stress.
Okay. Level of maybe cognitive stress or
Okay,
something?
sure.
Cognitive stress.
Fatigue.
Fatigue. Feeling I can't learn any more today or something, right? Learn any more today. Not a great definition, but you know, it's something for us to start. And sometimes it'll take some fiddling to come up with your definition, right? You might run it past other people. In many cases, you're dealing with a construct that's already been defined by other people. You've pulled it out of the literature. Somebody theorized something, but they haven't developed a tool to measure it yet. And so you know it's already been defined. You just got to pull the definition. But that's the first step, because if you don't know what it is you're talking about, you're not going to be able to create good questions. And I've seen that kind of problem before where I see people they're trying a bunch of items in a survey, and they wanted to measure something like self-esteem. And they haven't really sat down and figured out what do they mean by it. Okay, let's say we wanted to measure happiness. What do you mean by happiness, you know? What does that mean? I mean, there's so many different ways you can define that, and if you just start throwing questions out there, without even define it, you're going to have a problem, okay? And so let's just say that we pretend that we think that's a good definition, okay? You will often do a lot of literature review on the idea, get opinions of experts, whatever, to help define it. But we're just using us because we're the experts in this today, okay? Well, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start developing an initial pool of items. You don't have to do it all by yourself. You know, that's something, again, where you can consult with other people, you brainstorm. You might see similar items that people use to measure something similar, and you tweak and change them to fit what you're doing, okay? So maybe somebody else already has a scale out there that measures feeling physically overloaded or something, and you find, oh, I can adapt that. You know, let's say now we want to look at this. So we look through and we get a whole group of potential items, okay, that we want to do. So what I want to do here is I want each row, some of your rows are bigger than others, to come up with one potential questionnaire question. Okay, we'll just make it one to make it So get with your other person or 3 or 4 people, come up with one question and come write it over here.
My brain, my mind often wanders on other things or something. Like I can't concentrate on what she's saying.
Are we doing this on a Likert scale?
Yeah, let's assume it's going to be a 1 to 5 Likert scale. So you have a statement that people are going to agree or disagree with.
Daydreaming often.
And you want to be able to assess how much of this they have. I feel like my brain is closed.
That's true. I have a headache.
But it doesn't have to. No, it doesn't have to. Just example.
Yeah,
It might just be my brain is closed. Yeah, just write it up on that side.
I have trouble concentrating duration of the class.
What?
How about I'm having trouble concentrating.
Yeah, I gotta do that
I
too,
wrote
you're
about
right.
that for my.
I'm having trouble concentrating. Or what? Anything else?
No, it's, I'm having trouble concentrating.
Of the class period.
Okay.
Does that still measure brain overload though? That can measure if you're ADD.
I think I am. They got it.
About.
Back. The number 1 was ours.
Was it too?
Yeah.
Similar?
Yeah.
That's all right.
There are.
Oh, someone else should get a note taker.
Not enough breaks.
Is that measuring that your brain?
Yes, I wrote it down there. What's your name? Amanda.
We're looking for indicators, not some direct.
We took ours.
Are you?
I-
Are you college?
How about?
Oh, do you? You need to wear more.
Yeah.
Every word in a little bit, just.
Clothes on.
Sounds
She's got a
better.
t-shirt
That's
on.
okay.
She has a
I
t-shirt.
don't sleep.
Yesterday she was
Affects my ability to
sleep.
It's not my daughter. She took ours. She
You don't have to say.
will not wear anything but t-shirts. Long sleeve t-shirts.
This is a question that can be agreed with or disagreed with.
Derek, you're writing down.
What is it?
Sleep.
Did we get one or?
No, we took ours.
Mine's going out right a straight line to the next door.
Actually,
Oh
works
my
really
gosh,
well
it is
with
not
your
right on.
response. That's awesome.
Yes,
That's pretty good.
I cannot remember.
it's hard to see.
Oh,
Do we have any more?
The level of information I retain.
You
as
notice this
class
4th one is
progresses,
reverse
decreases.
kind of worded.
Yeah.
That's getting at the opposite, which is good. It's all right to throw. Well, there's debate. Some people think it's not good, but most people say it's good to throw in things worded the other direction.
I'll write it.
I pay attention better in the mornings than I do in the afternoon.
We have to stop with that.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
You can say
tired. Oh, I'm getting hungry. That's a good one.
This person
In
is
2002, well, one of the areas I had was measure faculty increases in internationalization. They did it in public institutions and across the program in 2002. So they're keeping there. But I could change it from faculty to something else too. Or just do that. Yeah.
If you like what they did, we test it and see if it holds true too.
Cause it's like a 10 years later. Was it changed?
I mean, that's a good
That's what I think. It's kinda hard to do first one, you know, and then
I'm going to turn around and talk to me.
that cutting edge with the dropping.
Right there.
Separated
And you know.
for 2 years.
But it was, you know,
I was surprised.
It's now a year, and if you find your husband cheating in the state of North Carolina, or you are cheating, that person, your husband, like, your husband will be charged, you can win $10,000 and then $10,000 from the woman. No lie. Automatically.
She should be on the trip.
Go back Kentucky.
It now works, it's, no, because it's no, you can do no one day, and get divorced in 30 days. That's
Yeah.
Because it goes from your county where you live, it goes to generally.
Now, do you want to scale or not? I don't see any scale.
No, we'll just assume everybody's got a,
As long as you can.
everything's a 1 to 5 scale.
Well, who's not fine.
When you're in the
No
same,
problem.
So that's
when you're
what
in the session.
We have them all?
Because they still think men have power over women and women are property. And I bet in Mississippi and Louisiana, you kill them as a big
Okay, so this is kind of how it would be responded to.
We need to, we need to.
Those are our
make a
response categories. And these are our questions, but some of you probably can't see through this thing, but I can. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we have this initial pool of items. We're gonna look at them for face validity. Okay, that means we're just gonna kind of read through them and go, oh, do I see, does this seem like it's getting at the right thing, okay? First one, I'm having trouble focusing on the information being presented. Does that feel like it hits it?
Yes, that was ours.
You would all give that a 5
Initially.
today?
But I have
Yes.
problems with that one.
Strongly agree.
So are we
Agree.
focusing on a specific time period of class? Because, I mean, if someone who has attention deficit disorder, that could be any time. And so is that measuring
Good point, Sarah.
the,
But if we want to get out of here
are we looking at just a
Are we
time
looking
period?
at right this
class?
second how you feel or how you tend to be in general?
And that wasn't defined, was it?
Yeah, that's where some
Choking
people have some
on my
vagueness.
Agree or
That's
disagree?
Then we are guilty of that too.
Yeah, I think that we have some vagueness, and if you read through these, you'll see some interpreted it one way and some the other. So right now we have a little issue in that we didn't define it clearly enough, right? So we've got to decide, do we mean in general, or do we mean right this very second? How you're feeling?
I'm currently having trouble.
Currently, there you go.
And is it in general, or is it, right, just get it after being, in the class?
Or is it in
After
general
lunch.
when I've been in the class for 4 hours like this, right? Right? So what is it
Couldn't
we're
we-
trying to get at right now?
Can we put a stem at the top for all of them after 4 hours of lecture and then kind of, you know what I mean, honestly, like for all of them, I am having trouble, I feel so, and that would,
Do we want it something like how I generally am after 4 hours of lecture? Is that what we're getting at? Okay. Because I think then in that case, then we can clarify to get her on the same page. Because in a way we have a little validity issue in that we're getting there's two different things being measured here, right? Because different people took it a little different way. So this is what we're going to get at whether or not that's how some people took it. So, so we're gonna add that on here after 4 hours of lecture. Right. Lecture, whatever. I have trouble focusing on the information being presented.
Yes.
So it's more like how you evaluate yourself as usually doing after that amount of time, as opposed to right this minute today. Okay. After 4+ hours of lecture and note taking, I'm very tired. Okay. Does that seem to hit at it?
that was mine.
Okay. I feel as though I cannot retain any new information
And I'm forgetting
4
old.
hours.
After 4 hours?
After one.
Well, we have chosen to define it as how we generally are after 4 hours. We could have chosen to define it as how I happen to be right now, this very second, you know, but that might be a good one. My afternoon note taking is good as my morning, which is that getting at the same idea, but it's the opposite, right? Okay, so it's the opposite. And I think afternoon versus morning, does that get at the same thing as about 4 hours? Do we feel it's close enough for our purposes? It may or may not be. So this is something we call reverse coded. Reverse coded. In other words, a 1 on this would be equivalent to a 5 on the others, right? Okay.
Now, is 5 most or least?
Okay. Well, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We usually use 5 for the most agree side.
Okay.
So this one would be, if I strongly agree with that, I'm not very brain dead or overloaded. I'm not very overloaded if I have a 5. So this one's reverse. Okay, I'll tell you about how we deal with that in a second. Okay, I'm more attentive in the morning than the afternoon. Okay, does that get at it? Okay, we feel like it's close enough? Yes, someone raise your hand.
But is that relative to today or generally? I'm more attentive.
Yeah, I think that we were trying to hit it generally, right? Not today, on this occasion. It's generally easier to measure today on this occasion than it is how to measure how someone is generally. That you can validly do either one, you know? I mean, I really want to know in general how you do after 4 hours. I don't want to know today, because today might be unusual because you didn't eat lunch, or, you know. But it might be that in general, you feel like you have trouble. Or in general, you feel like you really can manage it pretty well, right? So that's what I guess we've decided as a group to do there. Yes?
Would it be better to just say, after 4 hours, I'm this, or try to identify what makes you this after 4 hours? Does that question make sense?
Okay, clarify.
So is it lecture that makes you
Yeah.
not able to pay attention? Is it writing? Is it people around you in the classroom? Is it lack of
And that may,
breaks? Is it?
right, that maybe get something different. That's something different where we're trying to get at the why behind it. And if we're trying to get at the why behind it, often that becomes a qualitative project. But if you have a list of options, what you could end up doing is have several subscales, one of which gets at, 4 hours of lecture, or one gets around 4 hours of being in company of other humans. One could be 4 hours without eating. I mean, there might be a variety of reasons. 4 hours without sitting. There's a lot of reasons that it could be. It could be just 4 hours of something to do with statistics, right? It could just be that. And those would be sub ideas or sub constructs within a bigger one. And we'll kind of address that a little more when we get to factor analysis.
So generally speaking, you just want to figure out what happens, but not why it happens.
Yeah, generally when you get into the details of the whys, either you got to break it down more, or you do qualitative research where you like interviewing people. Why is it? Why do you think that you're struggling? And often the why questions are answered with qualitative research, with interviews one-on-one. Because it's hard to give enough options, and you start biasing people towards things. You put ideas in their head. You want real pure response often. In those cases, you might do qualitative research. Okay. Last one is I am more alert than I typically am during the first hours of my work day. So this would be after 4 hours, right? After 4 hours. I am more late than in the first 2 hours. So it's sort of a reverse one also. Okay. So we don't know whether these are the best ones in the whole universe, but we've looked at basically face validity means we've just done kind of a quick informal pass at, do we think these look kind of right? Okay, do we think these look right enough? That makes sense? Okay, the next step we would often do if we were trying to develop the scale is we might take these items, we type them up, and we do one of two things, or both. One being that we can have some experts in this trait, okay, that maybe they're psychologists or something, and we sit, or learning experts, and we sit down with them and say, do you feel like these questions get at it? How would you rate these questions? Any of these questions are core? That kind of thing, okay? And the other thing is we would sit down with maybe students and we would sit down and say, tell me what you're thinking when you answer each of these. Do you feel like it's really honestly answering for you this, how brain overloaded you are? Do you feel like you're responding this way for other reasons? Okay, for example, this last one, after 4 hours, I am more alert After 4 hours, I am more alert than I typically am during the first 2 hours of my workday. Right? Maybe this is getting at the idea that you're slow to wake up rather than your brain gets burned. It might be getting at something a little bit slightly different. And so that's where you start having the user say, well, what were you getting at when you respond to that? What were you thinking? Well, I was thinking that, I'm slow to wake up in the morning. I didn't have a cup of coffee or whatever, So that's where you kind of go through that with people to really see. You don't want to skimp on the time spent getting these polished up. And sometimes it can be hard because there are people that when you have them, even if you just have them review your questions for grammar and meaning, they're gonna nitpick, and you're gonna think their nitpicking is nonsense, and you don't agree, and you're being too picky, and the words mean the same thing as what you just said, whatever. But in the end, it actually does help, because if someone looks at it and slightly misunderstood what you meant, you want to catch that now and not have 100 people take the survey and half of them misunderstand. Okay, so it can be a hard thing. When my first research job, we did like survey development constantly. That was just constantly what I was doing, and the nitpickiness just about drove me out of my mind. I'd go through 20 versions and take it to lead researcher, and she'd tell me to change stuff, we'd bring it back, and then she'd tell me to change it back it was. And it's just that, my gosh, we will never get this thing out. It doesn't really matter. It means the same thing. But in the end, you end up with a lot more clarity if you've gone through all that hassle. So that's why anytime you have someone evaluate your writing, it's hard. Okay.
You answered it.
I answered it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So it can be a little bit of a struggle. So let's assume we've had everyone look at, we're just delighted with our questions, 6 questions there, okay? And I think that they're going to work great. It's always better to have more questions than you finally think you want, because when you go to test them, some of them may just not go very well. People may misinterpret, and they don't seem like they intercorrelate with the others. So small, this kind of can overlap with the validity testing, where I'm having people just but that's typically I'm thinking of, I've got a final type version, or it's finally coded in Qualtrics. I send a link of it to some people and have them do it so they catch my typos, and they look for any final miswordings or stuff like that that's going to cause me a problem. Sometimes you leave out an item and you get something there twice, there's things that happen. So that kind of stuff you want to do. And then you're ready for pilot. And again, the piloting typically happens most likely when you're doing a brand new survey or substantially changing something that's already out there. You've wanted to make it half as long, or you've done something substantial change. Change the wording on a lot of them, and you have some reason to question, okay, do I have the best possible instrument? I want the best possible instrument. That's what pilot testing is often about. As far as how many, it depends on what stats you're going to run. I like to do 100. Sometimes you cannot. Sometimes you can do 20 or 50. You do what you can do, okay? But you send it to your group, and then you're going to run through these stats that we just did, okay? These stats we just ran through, which is the looking at how many responded in each category, okay? Everybody puts strongly agree. There's something wrong. Either the question's going to be a problem, you're not getting any information that way, right? So either you've got to find some way to, maybe you make more categories so you can space out the responses on this, where they have a, slightly agree, mostly agree, strongly agree, you spread it out somewhere like that, okay? So you can get people, you don't want everyone responding the same way, it's not helpful. And then we look at our means and standard deviations, reliability. If we have enough data at that time to look at some of the other evidences of validity, the criterion or construct validity, we have to enroll at that stage if we have enough data to do it. Yes?
Under defined construct, opinions of expert, and also on a pilot where you have expert,
Yeah, I use
survey
experts
quality,
anytime.
are they not the same?
Yeah, they could be the same people. I mean, you'd have some experts help you define what it means. Maybe people you
Is one more
know.
formal than the other?
No, it's different purpose. For here, it's more making sure you define the construct right. You may do it again here to make sure that your items reflect that definition. You may do it here just to make sure that your form has no typos and is clear and is understandable and doesn't have any last things. In this case, it wouldn't necessarily need to be the extreme experts in the field. This could just be other researchers who have a good eye for grammar and detail at that point, okay? You don't want to overburden, the head of the psychology department or something, if they're to look for your grammar mistakes. But you might ask them questions to get at the construct right, to get an idea of whether you're hitting the construct right with your items, okay? If they're well. So that's kind of brief there. The factor structure is something we're talking about later unit. Okay, so I just kind of noted in there. That's where we look to see maybe these items don't measure one thing, but they measure two things. There may be two related things they're measuring. We'll look at that later. And then we can do some revise and moving. Always, even in your final survey when you do it, you want to, again, look at reliability with your final sample and just report it. And you want to, if you get any additional evidence that can make a case for validity, you want to also include that in your final report. A lot of people are much more often report reliability than they do validity because it's easier. Validity is just as important and often neglected. Okay. Briefly overview. I think let me just go through this next slide and then we're going to go to SPSS for a minute. Existing instrument, if you use one that's already in there, you really just are getting to skip some steps. Instead of yourself doing a pilot to look at reliability and validity, factor structure, again we'll do later months, instead of you doing it yourself, you're going to review existing research literature to see what people have already done. Somebody else has already studied it and has already shown that it has shown evidence of reliability and validity. You don't need to do it, start from scratch, okay? You just need to cite all that. You need to say, so-and-so found in their population reliability of the scores of 0.78 and somebody else showed 0.83 and so-and-so showed some evidence of validity and so forth. And you just present that as background information in that case. So there's a real advantage, of course, to using an existing instrument. It saves you steps, okay, in your work. And then you're just going to discuss to make sure that it's really matches what you want, however, okay? And maybe validity for measuring the construct as they defined it, but you want something a little different. So you need to just always discuss that. You also, yes?
When you say, for the first bullet point, what if you were trying to use an instrument in a different population set?
Yeah, that's actually hitting this third one. If it is a different population, you've got to be reasonable about thinking how different might they be. If this tool has been only used in the past on college students and you want to use it for third graders, you could end up with a problem, right? Because third graders may interpret the meaning of words even differently. So in that case, you may need to do a small pilot with third graders to show that the instrument's going to work okay before you do some huge study and put all these resources into it. It would make a lot of sense, okay? So it really is just a matter of how different your population. It's very common for these things, the reliability, validity, and factor structure, which is something you probably don't know a lot about yet, to vary across populations or across cultures even. It's only been used, in China in the past, and you're taking a Chinese instrument and you're bringing it here, and because of cultural differences, now it means something different. It's measuring something totally different here than it was. Or it could even just be across cultural groups within the United States, that something means something different. Yes?
How do you know if it's good? I mean, last semester in Dr. Miller's class, we had this survey we had to redo, And the more we learned about it, the more we knew it was awful, but it had been used in somebody's dissertation. You see what I mean?
Oh,
everything that's
dissertation's no guarantee.
Well, I just thought it would be, you know.
Well, no, it's not, because, you know, if, well, on the dissertation topic, you know, I know that sometimes they'll tell you, look for, studies or similar what you wanna do and replicate. You don't go guaranteeing that someone else got a dissertation off it, it is good. Because a dissertation is approved by a small group, you know, 4 or 5, or whatever, committee members at a particular institution. And you don't, not all faculty members at all institutions do good quality work. They just don't all, you know? So, the fact that somebody else's dissertation did something is not a guarantee of quality at all. They may not have even had a specialist on their committee in survey development, for one thing, that understood the principles. So, if the results of the dissertation got published, you can feel better about it, okay? You can feel better about it if it eventually got published. So just take it as a starting point, somebody else's, but even things that are published, they'll often have weak spots, particularly if they're old. You know, they're old, people have, since then, we think differently about the construct now, or we understand a little bit more about how to do high quality surveys than we did 20 years ago, and so there may be some flaws in it too. Yes, I know Dr. Miller talked to you about survey construction from the point of view of things like wording and that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So and that also is all true. This is all true. His criteria are all true, good criteria that you want to look at. What we're particularly adding to that in this class is, if you have a group of items meant to jointly measure one latent trait, do we know that it measures that latent trait adequately? That's what we're adding to what he did. All his principles are still true. Okay, so how do you know whether you still go through his criteria to define whether it's good? Once we start looking at these things, how do you know if it's good? Well, you want reliability that is sufficient. If it's below 0.7, there's a problem for sure, the reliability. And depending on how precise you need your results to be, you may want it quite a bit higher than that. If it's above 0.8, I wouldn't worry generally, you know. In the 0.7s, I consider kind of gray. I would try to improve the instrument if I could. If I'm above 0.8, I'm good. If it's above 0.9, I might start thinking, hey, I could shorten this actually. I might start actually thinking that. That's kind of how I think about it. So anyway, that you say, is the reliability sufficient? You say, do I have some evidence of validity, a convincing argument for validity, okay? And that doesn't mean I've proven for sure that it's good, and I've not, you know, that I have sufficient argument that this measures what I want it to measure. So it's usable, okay? It's a usable instrument. And people might come back, I mean, there's instruments that are frequently used out there that people reanalyze and rewrite about over and over. Every couple of years, somebody writes a new article reanalyzing such and such a commonly used instrument, and they come back and say, no, it just doesn't measure 3 traits, it measures 5. You looked at it all wrong, you know, and so that kind of thing does happen, because we're just provide, you know, we're never 100% sure whether things are perfect. Things are never perfect. Human things, human created things. Okay, anyway. So that's it, basically. I just want to, in your sample, you still want from your own sample, even though it's already been shown to be reliable and valid, you want to add any evidence you have of reliability and validity when you write it up. Whether you're writing a report or a dissertation or a paper to be published or whatever, you want to still add your evidence in of these things, okay? And what you found in terms of item and scale means and standard deviations, okay? So you still want to add that to it. We're going to go to an example here. Actually, let me just go through this last page and we can go to SPSS and not come back to this on here. The last thing to keep in mind, the last type of project, or that's most commonly done using these things, is shortening an existing instrument. We're going to deal a little bit with that with an example here. We mentioned already that alpha if deleted and the item total. Here's the alpha if deleted down here, okay? Basically, you're looking for, if you remove that item, would this number here actually be higher than the original reliability? You're also looking to see whether these numbers are particularly low, under 0.3 or under 0.2, would be quite low, okay? And you take out one item, run it, and see if you could pull out another item. Never remove an item just because of the statistics. Always also look at the wording of the item and consider whether that messes up your validity argument. You know, at least whether you can make an argument for removing it. It's redundant with another item wording so closely, oh, I'm going to take it out. Okay, all right, phew. Let's go over to SPSS. And we're going to run through another example SPSS. What I need you to do is open the data set. Let's do the one, okay, it's called